Hi, I'm Pooja. Today I'll be talking about Studio X. We're working on tools to help artists simplify on-chain crowdfunding. So what does Kickstarter on-chain really look like? How can we automate on-chain rewards for backers and transparency for projects? So a bit about me, I come from the startup world as an early engineer building consumer fintech and also AI tooling, previously at Facebook. Was at Berkeley studying computer science. And on a more personal note, I've been songwriting my entire life. Grew up as a kid around a community of creatives in LA and have close friends who've both gone to sign major label deals and also independent, been inspired into financing and music for a long time. So the music industry has traditionally retained more ownership and creative control than many would like today. So it's said that 1 in 3 artists have actually signed some sort of predatory contract before they've gone off the ground. So this is traditionally at the start of their inception point. And due to the more discourse around this, there's actually been a rise of more independent artists today than ever before. So I've personally seen high streaming artists actually leave massive upfront advances on the table just to have more independent creative and monetary control over their music. So that brings us to the point that raising capital for these extensive projects remains challenging today. So if not for artist advances, which is high fractional ownership, Web2 crowdfunding campaigns actually provide no ownership for backers. So we're looking to kind of bridge that gap with on-chain crowdfunding. We just saw that some ERC20 crowdfunds did pretty well in the past couple of years. Yet talking to artists and collectors, it was clear that it was very manual for artists to actually set up the treasury, manage the treasury of tokens, manually route revenue back from the project. And collectors really wanted more ownership from the project, which they didn't receive. So we actually believe that crowdfunding should allow collectors and backers to own the content that's released on-chain. And thanks to the rise of media-specific NFT marketplaces, we can actually start doing so. So how does this look? There's a small capital raise, project is developed, backers automatically own all assets on-chain post-release. We actually automated this process for an artist that was raising for an EP, raised a small amount of capital to fund the body of work. Once it was produced, the backers actually got all songs that were minted on-chain. This is specifically integrated with SoundXYZ as earnings. Improved a couple of things. Artists need the upfront capital to produce the body of work, and collectors, crowdfunding via collecting enables a healthy mix of both patronage and speculation. And we want to focus on music, but largely at scale, realize that most large-scale creative projects require some form of advancing, from publishing novels to films, or even a group of kids making the first VR headset. Oculus was famously a Kickstarter project. So we're opening the platform up to more creators. We have a crowdfund live on Friday, live mint on base. Allow list is open, so we'd love for you to check it out.
Thanks, Pooja. Let's start with Q&A. So number one, given that music is typically distributed through non-crypto native channels, so think like YouTube or streaming platforms, how do you think of the value flowing back to backers for those channels?
Yeah, routing revenue via streaming, there's been a couple of companies that have done this and realized that streaming actually provides kind of like, compared to the on-chain revenue from minting songs themselves, quite like a low amount of revenue back to backers. So kind of building a full life cycle on-chain is actually much more lucrative for backers than kind of routing revenue from counting streams, which is essentially kind of like counting pennies at this point.
Right. Could you talk a little bit about your competitive differentiation to other crowdfunding tools, so things like Mirror?
Yeah, the main differentiator is essentially providing like the automated rewards for backers. So Mirror traditionally used ERC20 tokens to allow creators to fund these campaigns, but the actual process of rewarding back the revenue from the projects was fully on the back of the creator. So when specific on the vertical of music, there's actually an easier way to integrate other marketplaces to provide and automate that life cycle.
Right. Scott Hefferman asks, how does Web2 crowdfunding not allow ownership to the creator?
A traditional Web2 like album crowdfund kind of looks like a capital raise, and then usually like vinyl or CDs are given back to the original backer, but there's traditionally not much of a return. We've actually seen like a lot of hardware companies raise on Web2 crowdfunding campaigns. The way that they work is there's a capital raise, and then the first like initial prototype is given back to the original backers, which is actually a really cool concept if you start to digitize it on chain. So the first prototype being like the songs or like the media project minted. But it's more traditionally done with like physical objects like Oculus or Peloton was also a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter.
Right. You mentioned that you've already worked with a couple of musicians. Could you talk a little bit about how those drops have gone and if you've had any learnings from them?
Yeah, the biggest learning is that we've learned a lot from like how collecting has kind of changed from like the bull market to the bear market. And the conclusion is that I think collecting right now lays like in the middle of like book patronage and speculation. So collecting via crowdfunding actually enabled more of kind of like the passionate fan base that wanted these artists to actually succeed and like build their futures and kind of build projects that were important to them. So enable kind of like a subscription model for collecting, and that was kind of an interesting learning.
And Alexander Flores wanted to know, this doesn't include any specific transfer of rights, correct?
No, full master ownership for the artist.
And Paul Cowgill asks, how do the backers automatically become owners on sound.xyz technically? Like, who pays the gas for this? And do backers need to claim the NFT with any sort of on-chain transaction?
Yeah, so the previous campaign, we fully handled the airdropping and handled the gas fees for that. But we switched over to L2s to make it a lot cheaper.
Got it. Someone wanted to know, what is your go-to-market strategy and how will you draw creators to Studio X versus all of the different Web2 and Web3 alternatives? So we talked a little bit about Mirror, but there's also Kickstarter, GoFundMe, etc.
Yeah, we've actually received a lot of interest from Web3 creators that have dropped on more of the traditional like Zora sound marketplaces because they need kind of the upfront capital for these projects. From like the Web2 world, I think that's kind of like a strategy for all of Web3 to kind of like harness, but we're starting with more like Web3 native music artists.
Got it. One last question. Did you follow the early sweatshirt drop on Gala? Any learnings from that?
The early sweatshirt, I actually didn't. If you have context on that.
Someone asked that. I'm actually not familiar either. I'll ask one more question from the audience. What is your roadmap for the next couple of months? Like, you mentioned that you're trying to expand outside of musicians. What does that sort of look like?
Yeah, I think it's easiest done with music right now because there's more music NFT collectors. There's more artists that need this upfront capital. I think the challenge with expanding to other markets is integrating that ownership aspect. That's much easier with music because of these the rise of like tokenized media, specifically with songs. But the go-to-market strategy with music, I think, is to kind of target Web3 artists right now and collectors who are kind of more keen on collecting like kind of large scale music NFTs.
Got it. Thanks so much, Pooja. That was great.